the table, not on the table.
Not on the table.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. We're just making sure we're recording live, so folks at home are going to be watching this, so we'll stall until we know that's happening.
Everyone vote? It's important. Not telling you who to vote for.
Never.
But vote.
Great.
Literally. And if you have a friend in Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, tell them to vote too.
Well, welcome. Good evening. We're so happy for you all to join us for the Artist and Icon series. You're in for a very special treat tonight, and hello to the folks who are watching us live or at home. We're going to begin with the land acknowledgement. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land on which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and the Gabrielino Quiche peoples. I'm Vice Mayor Chelsea Byers. So glad to see you all here. I'm going to pass it over to our Mayor, John Erickson.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Artists and Icons. It's a great time. And we're really in for a really special treat tonight, and it's so excited. And I'm so excited to announce and introduce our two amazing panelists. So first, we have Patrisse Cullors, who is a New York Times best-selling author, educator, artist, and abolitionist from Los Angeles. And she's awesome, just to be like completely go off script. Her work has been featured at the Broad, the Geffen Contemporary at MoCA, Frieze LA, Hammy Museum, the Fowler, and a host of theaters, galleries, and museums across the globe. Cullors has won numerous awards for her art and activism, and in 2020 she launched a one-of-a-kind online MFA program at Prescott College. She has also launched the Crenshaw Dairy Mart with fellow artists Noe Olivias and Ali Riza Doris. So, next up, we have Nancy Baker Cahill, who is an American interdisciplinary media artist and expanded filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She has created immersive augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, experiences, video installations, and blockchain projects, often rooted in drawing. Her work frequently merges technology and public art, drawing upon both ecofeminist land art and the history of the political interventions to examine systemic power, body autonomy, civics, and climate crisis, among other issues. She is the founder and director of Fourth Wall, a free AR public art platform focused on public engagement, critical social practice, and site interventions. And you can actually see her art right now up on the Sunset Strip at the Sunset Spectacular, and I think another billboard two more billboards down the way. It's an incredible experience. Go up there. It's a sight you've never seen. So without further ado, I want to introduce our amazing panelists.
I know on purpose, because I heard there's a camera here, and that so you can't move. Okay, I already moved. Don't mind. Is there always awkward chairs to get to? Like, I don't want to die. Okay, I did it. I'm much shorter than people understand me to be. I'm only 5'2", guys. It's always like a thing. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this gloomy Los Angeles day. How are we doing today? Good. And hi, everybody who's Zooming in or on WehoTV. I'm so grateful to be here. I just want to start off with asking, how are you doing?
I love that question. Thank you. We often say, how are you? But we don't always really mean it. And I think if I answer honestly, I am a combination. I'm very, very excited to be here with you. This is such an honor to be in conversation with you. I have a sort of fever pitch of dread about the upcoming election. So and sort of the state of the world right now. So I'm sitting with that, as everyone is. I'm not unique in any way in that sense. And I'm feeling really grateful to be an artist and to be able to have a practice in this moment. So, and I just really appreciate you asking, because people don't always ask. And how are you?
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. You know, I think whenever I have the opportunity to just like be on a stage and talk to the other human beings who come and witness the conversation, I'm often very curious about the performance of being on stage, of like being a panelist, and I'm always curious about like the person, like how are we actually doing? And so for me, I'm in a very similar place. Like I feel a lot of gratitude for the opportunity to be alive and a human being and a really awful timeline that we're living in, and to try and resource myself, but also the community around me to envision and imagine the world that we deserve. And I'm also like, this sucks. This shit sucks. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on WehoTV. I'm sorry.
I think on WehoTV we are.
That makes sense. And so I kind of go back and forth around that. Before I keep asking you questions, I also just want the audience, since it's a smaller crowd, just take a moment to think about how you're doing this evening. Like, just be honest. This is a space that we can just like be as honest as we possibly can, and give yourself a little bit of time to reflect on how you are, how you're showing up, and what you're experiencing in this moment. I want to offer that back to y'all. Good. So, you got some billboards up.
I do. I now have all billboards up.
Let's go. Woo! You can clap for that. We're going to need you to be robust because it's 7 of you, okay? We need you to bring it to us. Snap, ashe, amen, all of it. We will take it. And also, you're an artist. And, you know, I really love, one of my favorite things when I'm talking with other artists is asking about your practice and how you relate to your practice. So the first question I have for you is just like, how did you know you're an artist, and when did you know you were an artist?
I really love that question, and it's another question very few people ever ask. I think you're the first. It's a wonderful question, actually, because I think from a very early age, my parents sort of identified me as an artist because I love to draw, and I drew all the time, and that was sort of a first language for me, and still is on some level. But I don't think I think the moment I knew I was an artist came much, much, much later in life. And there are really 2 moments that I could identify. One is sort of inchoate and unconscious, and one was much more conscious. And I would also add that for me, at least, it hasn't been like linear per se. I think that and of course this all depends on how you define artist. I think, you know, when I was younger, I thought if you can draw well, obviously you're an artist. And it turns out really that's not what being an artist is. It's not the task, and at least not for me. I can only speak for myself. But I think the first time I knew I was an artist, again, inchoate, I'm reflecting on this as an adult, but I was very young. I think I was probably 10 or 11. I was already extremely surly. And I was sent away to a YMCA camp in the Berkshires, which was of my own personal hell. And I was very unhappy. I hated every moment of it. And frequently they had, and I'm agnostic, I'm not a religious person, but we would have, quote, chapel in the woods. And I remember, you know, sitting there one day and just, you know, in my own head, just gnashing my teeth, like, why do I have to be here? Why do I hate this? And I got distracted by the rustling of the trees and the leaves. This is going to make me sound like maybe I should be ushered out of here in a straitjacket, but I looked at the trees and I was overwhelmed suddenly with a sense that this is going to sound really, really strange, but that my grandparents were in the trees. And I was like, it took my breath away. And I actually got choked up because I thought, how are you in the trees? And then I felt beyond just my grandparents that there were other entities in the trees, and I felt extremely protected. I felt so safe, and it was a rare moment of feeling safe. And for whatever reason, I think that has something to do with my artistry, if I can call it that. So that was a very inchoate, young experience. And then when I was an undergraduate in college, I became really, really inspired by, like, this is going to date me. This was in the early 90s, and I was really inspired by the work of like ACT UP and Grand Fury and Jenny Holzer. And so I actually was, I will say I discovered my own sort of feminist roots, and I co-founded an agitated propaganda group called Eat Me. And I think it was with Eat Me, I think the name probably says it all. We did these interventions that involved like wit and humor, but that were dealing with very serious topics, right? And that, to me, I felt like I had found a certain voice, but also a calling as it related to working collectively toward a common goal. And that was another, it was a real shift for me, because I think for a long time I had struggled with this very monolithic or monocultural idea of what an artist was, and that really broke it open. And so, although I took quite a detour after that brief sort of explosive moment, I think when I think back to my real roots as an artist, those are two kind of pivotal points that I could cite that have informed me now everything I do today.
I love that so much, and I'm so glad that you allowed yourself to share your relationship to nature. I think nature is such a significant healer and transformer, and so beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I want to know about these billboards. There's been lots of controversy, and also you've been very vocal about it, but also, like, sometimes when we do work, the controversy becomes like the headline versus the work itself. And so I would love for you to tell this audience about the work itself, and if you can walk us through the arc in which, both conceptually, but also just like the material, the medium of this work, the message and messages of these billboards. Give us some fullness around this.
Thank you so much for asking. I am very excited to talk to you about this. This has been a labor of love for the past 2 years, and I have to say that the city of West Hollywood, this is an unapologetic shill. They have been incredible partners. They have supported this project from the beginning. I even pinched myself when I first pitched it, and they said yes. I was like, they're gonna let me do this? Like, this is amazing. Who else would do that? But Body Politic really it's a multi-part process. It's an interactive project as well as a billboard project, so there is an AR component, which I'll also address. But about 2 years ago, I was invited to apply, and as I know you were, and I'm excited to talk about that as well. And I had been thinking, I'd been tracking and researching and following closely the desecration of and devolution of body autonomy in the United States, and watching the sort of architecture emerge of this complete undoing, the unraveling. And I thought, I want to do something about this. This is a project that's really important to me, and I had done a somewhat guerrilla intervention in AR around that time that was called State Property, and it was basically, and this will make sense in a moment, but it was a uterus that exploded in augmented reality, and because I'd been thinking a lot, and I put it over, obviously, the Supreme Court, which is where it belongs and where it is still today, thank you, and also over the state houses of a number of states that had passed the most sort of draconian, barbaric laws restricting reproductive health. Anyway, so I had been thinking a lot about wombs as sort of disembodied sites of public intervention. How did this happen? This is something that, has been obviously in the works for a long time, but it had now become materialized in these very clear judicial and legislative ways. So that was on my mind. And then I thought, well, so originally the project was really about not reproductive justice is like exclusively, but it then evolved because it became a much larger conversation around not just civic engagement, but how can we look at the different entangled systems that allow for this? One of those is the loss of data privacy, the loss of biometric surveillance capitalism. How does that also relate to racialized redistricting and redistricting generally that serves one party over another? That is like the epitome of an anti-democratic process, but that has been mastered so efficiently by the GOP. So it became a kind of tripartite concern. And when I think of threes, I think about trimesters. We're both mothers, and I was thinking there's a kind of beautiful conceptual clarity to dividing those three entangled influences into this kind of conversation, this triad. And so in addition, it occurred to me that like there are three branches of government as well. There are lots of things that happen in three, and that maybe these things could be woven together in a way that was persuasive and compelling, but also impactful. And right now I'm talking about the film, just to be clear. I want to talk about the AR too. Around that time, I watched one of the best anti-war films probably the best anti-war film I've ever seen, which is a Russian film, believe it or not, called Come and See. Have you ever seen this? Okay, well, definitely brace yourself. Yeah, okay. It's from 1985, and I guess this is a bit of a spoiler alert. Hopefully you'll forget this if you see it. Just ignore what I'm about to say or cover your ears. But it is, there's a sequence at the end. It traces this young boy's journey in Belarus through, this is World War II. And you basically watch his childhood be eradicated through the horrors of war. And at the end, there's a sequence where he has a machine gun and he sees a picture of Hitler and he just starts shooting at the picture. And there's this just absolutely masterful sequence that follows. And it is, too, an assault of imagery and videos and of the war. And I saw it and I thought, this is such a masterpiece, but it also reflects, it was super resonant because it reflected to me the way it feels to be a person in this moment, in this contested moment, as we absorb, oftentimes, we can't control what comes at us. What felt like an assault of terrible news across, not just for reproductive justice, but across many different topics. So I thought, I can't recreate that magic, but I want that to be a part of it too. So that informed what we call the headline sequence of the film, which comes after these three chapters. And it is just, all we did was pluck headlines from a variety of sources, all verified, not biased, and you'll judge for yourself what you take from that. But it is overwhelming. And I think a lot of people who've experienced the billboard have talked about feeling disturbed and moved by that. And it turns out that who knows? And also I had to revisit the exploding uterus because in the film, because I think it is a violent image, but I think that these laws are violent. I think it's violent to kill your citizenry. I think it's violent to force birth on children, and I think it's violent to force women to go septic and have them bleed out on emergency room floors. So, sorry, I'm getting so intense. But anyway, but I felt all of these things should be expressed in a way that was poetic and not didactic, but really as an invitation to consider the body itself and the body politics. So both, our individual bodies, but also our collective body, and how we can resist, how we can take action together. Which leads me to the AR component. Sorry, I'm being so long-winded. I'm going to try and make this really pithy.
You don't need to do that.
Okay.
Because we're just talking up
All right,
here.
thank you.
We have lots of time.
We do, actually.
Yeah, the team came here to see you. The team came here to see you, so...
Okay, well, and you, and I really don't want to monologue, but just to give context to the AR, it felt really important, critically important, if we're going to talk about civic engagement, if we're going to talk about getting involved and getting out a vote, to highlight not just those three imperiled human rights, but to maybe identify more. And how could we do something that engaged the public, that allowed people to not just express their own concerns about these imperiled rights, but to actually take action. So over 2 of the billboards, there is an augmented reality experience, and this is where we get into another part of the film, which I did not mention. But if you download, I want to talk about Crenshaw and Fourth Wall, but I have my own platform. It's an AR platform, and if you download it, it's free. It's a public art platform, and if you go to what is called the Invisible Frame billboard, you can vote from anywhere in the world, but to experience the AR, you actually have to be on site. So if you go there and you aim your camera, you download the app, you tap the body politic whatever button, you can experience the augmented reality, which is a disco ball, which is it's very symbolic, which we could talk about. There's a whole history to that, and dance. So there's a disco ball and 3 bodies made of ballots, and you have the opportunity to vote. You can vote of one of 12 human rights. And your vote, whatever you vote, let's say you vote for right to clean water, okay? That vote will show up in the disco ball as a single panel, and it shows up in real time. So you can actually see the vote, and you can also see how everyone else is voting in real time. So it changes as we go. Again, this very living, breathing body politic, which we co-build. And, oh, there it is. Oh, here's the moment I described a moment ago. Supreme Court as, well, I don't need to explain it to you. I think we all know what bars mean. Yeah, and we also included the symbol for medical professionals who have also been criminalized for providing care. So you vote on one of these things, but we didn't want it to be merely performative. So if you choose to take further action, you can basically say, I want to take further action, and there's a hyperlink to an organization that's been pre-vetted where you can actually take additional action sort of outside of the realm of the virtual, where you can actually volunteer, offer, do whatever you want to get involved. So that felt really important. And if you turn around while you're standing there, you'll see ballots shooting out of the Sunset the Sunset Spectacular billboard as well. So that's the AR piece. And we just wanted, and the same dancers that are in the AR also in the film. So the dancers are the other sort of common thread. There's this seed that grows and pulses and threatens to sort of overwhelm the billboards, which to me was a metaphor perhaps for not just the experience of something growing inside of you, but also of a movement, of a conviction, of anything that grows maybe a little bit out of our control. And so really wanting to highlight issues of control and who gets to decide, because those seem to be important. So so that's body politic. I wonder if I probably left out way too much, but anyway, and when we say that it's now on all the billboards, we did encounter a moment of censorship where one of the billboard owners did not want to exhibit the work. And it actually, speaking of being grateful for being an artist and for our community, I certainly had the backing of the city, and they were working independently to rectify the situation, but I also felt compelled to speak up about it, and in doing so, was overwhelmed by the solidarity and support and shared stories of people who haven't had that advantage of having that reversed, and who have and continue to suffer the impacts of censorship, which we know is an ongoing and endemic problem that, in my opinion, is getting worse and affects all of us. And so to have that sense of community just kind of flood in was a rare privilege, and one that I don't take lightly at all. So,
thank you, and thank you for giving us all that fullness. Raise your hand if you're going to go check out the billboard and do the AR. Okay, that's the organizer in me. I can't help it. I'm like, all this work happened. And then raise your hand if you're going to bring friends and community. I definitely am, especially knowing that there is an AR component to it. Like, that sounds fun, and that all like that disco ball. I love that. I think about this WeHo Billboards project. You had a billboard up in 2018. I had one up in, I think it was early 2020, before the pandemic. And, it feels like such a subversive project because, I grew up with billboards being like the thing that's promoting the film that's coming out, or like the Gucci ad, and now it's like these artists are coming in to like really, in my opinion, challenge a viewer, an audience. In Los Angeles, it's often someone who's driving. We don't have really a pedestrian city in that way. So people are usually driving and then driving down Sunset. What do you think about who your audience is going to be when you were building this out? Like, were you like, I got to be real intense because it's going to be on Sunset? Or like, what was your process in thinking about who was going to view this?
Oh, that's such a good question, and I want to throw this right back to you too, because I'm so excited to hear about what you were thinking too. One of the things I really did want to think about was you could have 10 seconds of someone's, well, if they're paying attention to their driving, you really don't want 10 seconds, right? You might have a split second of their attention, or they could be stuck in traffic and you could have 10 minutes of their attention. So what are the mechanisms through which you can communicate complicated ideas simply? How do you make those, as we talked about earlier, how do you make those legible? And how do you reach people this is one thing I try to do in all the work, is to impact people viscerally. Because if you feel it if it's an unforgettable image, if it's something you feel in your body, that's where you can have tremendous impact. I didn't want to finger wag, I didn't want to, and not to say that doesn't work for some people. It's just, for me, it's like, how can I speak in an economy of images that would have an impact? And so my hope is that the audience is as broad and general as, Los Angeles itself, which is, who knows who's driving down Sunset. I will say one quick funny story, and then I want to talk about your project because I find it so electrifying. And speaking of subversive, when I did show in 2018, these were VR drawings. Jessica Rich, the curator, was so brave to show VR drawings, but they were on different billboards. They were I think the LEDs were pretty simple, and they were, I think, in another part of the city. Another part of the Strip. And they were very apocalyptic images, okay? It was like charred crap falling down from the sky. It was just kind of like, oh. And so you'd have like Ellen DeGeneres and like Seth Meyers doing their thing, and then it was like, oh. It was like a total apocalypse. And I know that gave me a little joy. I thought, I don't know, maybe people remember.
That's what I was hoping. I was hoping that was the response, that you could do a little chuckle and giggle because you're like, ha ha ha. Got you.
Yeah.
You thought you were going to see Kendall Jenner, but this time.
You got the opposite. But I want to hear about if you're. I know that we're teasing this because it's still a secret. It's some semi-secret. But would you be willing to talk about your project, because it's so inspired?
Yeah, sure. So super grateful for. I get to be the billboard alongside Ali Resadouris and Noé Olivas, my co-founders, Christian Derrimart. We each are also going to be a part of WeHo Billboards after you show. And my work is really an ode to Tricia Hersey, the woman who calls herself the Nap Bishop, and all of her really scholarship is on Black women resting, and the idea that Black folks, especially Black Americans, have given enough of our bodies, and that arrest is an act of resistance is literally her phrase. And so this work, shot in Joshua Tree, is really following this Black woman as she takes care of herself and rests and holds space and holds spaciousness. And I definitely am excited about this being up in West Hollywood for people to like kind of see a different image. One of my good friends, who's a director, filmmaker, she calls it visual reparations. I think especially for Black Americans who've just seen so much slaughter and horror of our bodies online, on social media, and in real time, to see something beautiful, to see this act of care and this quietness is a deep part of my performance practice and visual practice. So I'm extending it to this video work.
I think that's such a generous thing to do too. I mean, it's so beautiful in and of itself, but you know, you've talked a lot in your public speaking about creating a culture of care, and I think doing something like that in this very, very public way on these otherwise, like, let's face it, like hugely commercial, you know, this is ad space, and taking over that space to give this, to really offer an invitation to consider this is incredible. I mean, I think it's genuinely subversive, and it's also generous, you know?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm often thinking about the economy of care and like what we don't live in an economy of care. We live in an economy of punishment. And so how do I create a visual language that can speak to an economy of care, and that when people are witnessing or listening or watching or viewing work of mine, that they feel actually cared for. It feels very important to me.
It feels absolutely radical. It's not what motivates so many people. And I think that's what makes it, in its own way, really revolutionary.
Thank you. I have more questions. Okay, so I want to hear about one, who are you feeling inspired by right now? Which artists? Doesn't have to be, but I often like asking other artists, whose artistry is inspiring you, why, and is there like a particular work that you're going back to? I mean, you spoke about this film. I definitely want to watch it. That you're like inspired by. I will let you know that I went back to watch Scandal. I know, random, but also not so random, given our political moment right now. And I really wanted to go back to like epic storytelling. I think that we're in a moment that needs a reorientation around the story we're being told of what is necessary or possible. And so I was like, how does Shonda Rhimes do it? Let's go back to Scandal. And you know, I was like looking at the history of Scandal when it was made. This is pre-BLM. This is pre-Black Girl Magic. And she makes this leap where she puts a Black woman at the forefront of this TV show about the American government. And that really the story is like this Black woman is really controlling everything. She's like, it's her magic behind doors that is like making things happen, breaking things, fixing things. And like she retold a story about Black women like in seven seasons. And I just thought it was so special and so interesting, and it's just as wild as it was when it came out. And so that's like a piece of art that I'm going back to right now. And I'm wondering what is yours in this moment, and also the artists who are informing you.
Well, one of the things I love about that example is it actually echoes something you've said also around imagination, and how, you know, imagination is actually our greatest asset, and it's the thing that is going to allow us to break these structures, these assumptions, all of the things. And I remember I'm so embarrassed, I can't remember the name of the author, but there's a book I was reading on patriarchy, and she says that the great con of patriarchy is convincing us that there are no alternatives.
That's right.
And so what you're describing is an alternative, and that holds enormous power. And I think the artists that I'm most drawn to right now are offering alternatives and are breaking things. And are breaking, you know, I work a lot in digital media, as you may know, and I can cite a few examples. There there are examples of social sculpture. There are examples of actually gaming that I think are really exciting, that are calling out all kinds of sort of systemic injustices, but doing it in a way that is interactive and it sneaks up on you. This is my friend Mitchell Chan. He builds these games. He builds like a game a year, and one of his games, it lures you in with this. It looks so fun. Let's play baseball. Like let's okay, like sign me up. I don't know shit about baseball, but like I'm like, okay, I'm game. I'll play. And you realize as you start to play that you're not going to win. And you aren't going to win for all these different reasons, because you're gonna work extra hours to do this. Whoops, you didn't do so well. You didn't perform so well. So, and all these things, and you come out of it with it's conceptually airtight, but you come out of it with this really profound understanding of the ways in which late capitalism is rigged against the success of anyone other than like the few people that are, the disproportionate, the asymmetries, right? And so I find that very inspiring. I feel like that is the kind of art that sets my brain on fire. Sonia Clark, we talked about Declaration House. If you haven't read about this, please look it up. It's a Monument Lab project in Philadelphia. In a few short words, Jefferson, there's this house in, I forget exactly where it is. I don't know Philadelphia very well, but it's where Jefferson signed or really wrote the Declaration of Independence with Robert Hemings, okay, who was his enslaved valet and the brother of Sally Hemings. And it recenters Robert in the project. And what Sonia Clark has done, the artist, is, this is so beautiful. She has captured the eyes, the literal eyes, just photograph, or I guess they're videos of the eyes of many of their descendants. And these eyes are, I guess they must be on screens, because they're in every single window. So you walk up to this building and the eyes are just blinking at you. And it's this just extraordinary sort of juxtaposition, and it not just recenters the story, but it re-inhabits it in a way that I think is so beautiful, and it is the kind of work that I feel we need more of right now. So that's another example. I would say we are so lucky to live in Los Angeles. I feel like we're part of a community of artists who have incredibly robust social practices, who are not sitting idly by. I mean, I should have said this from the beginning. Patrice and I actually collaborated without knowing each other back in 2020, because two other people that inspired the hell out of me, Castles and Rafa Esparza, had cooked up an incredible intervention on July 4th, 2020, called In Plain Sight, and they invited artists like Patrice to come up with a very simple message to anyone who is incarcerated. Some of it was like immigrants who were incarcerated, but it wasn't limited to immigrants. It was basically anyone who's incarcerated. What would your message be? And they had these messages spelled out with skywriting. One day, all over, it wasn't just Los Angeles, it was all over the Southwest. And that wasn't the part I was involved in, but because this was so powerful, because this was so impactful, they wanted these messages to live in perpetuity, and so they asked me to host them in AR on Fourth Wall. And so I had the enormous privilege of hosting Patrice's work, which was, in her phrase, I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, but it was care not cages, over the LA County Jail. Yeah. And so that's another example. I mean, like, I know it was 2020, but it feels actually in many ways like Scandal. It feels so, like, I almost feel like we need it more now. It's like crazy to say that, but it really feels that way.
Thank you for reminding me of that project. And, during that time, because the project was like created before the pandemic and before the uprisings. And so when the pandemic happened and the uprisings happened, it was just like, oh, whoa, like the timeliness of that project was just so, so special. I just have a last question before we hand it to more questions. Right now, I know that we started off with like the grief and also the excitement of this moment, and like how we hold those two very sometimes at odd experiences in our body. How are you, like, what do you want to tell folks as we kind of transition into audience questions? Like, what do you, yeah, what's the insides of you want to tell folks right now?
Oh, that is okay. I probably should have folded this into what's inspiring you right now, but I want to cite a thinker and I have to give my partner a shout out, Jessie, who first introduced me to her work. Her name is Nora Bateson, and she talks a lot about ecological thinking. And I must say that, you know, as a child of the 70s, as you know from the disco ball, I think a lot of really inspired thought work happened in the 60s and 70s, obviously. I think this is a moment to revisit some of that thinking. And this woman, Nora Bateson, talks a lot about mutual learning and the humility required to learn from one another and to understand our essential interdependence and interconnectedness. And I think, you know, what I would love to leave people with is an exhortation or an invitation to consider new models of community care, of civic engagement, but also of how we care for one another. I said this at the opening, we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And that is going to be our demise. If we don't start to grok on some really, really deep level that the structures we have are not serving us, they have been corrupted, and how can we care not just for each other, for the more than human world, for the planet, for all of the life and quality of life that has been disrupted, destroyed, or is imperiled in some way. So I guess I would invite people to think ecologically and to think less in less of the terms that we've been conditioned under which we've been conditioned to think.
Thank you so much.
I want to know. Wait, I want to know what your answer is for that too, because that is a really juicy question, and I don't want to be the only one that answered it.
And I have no sense of time, by the way, so, okay, great. My answer to that question, I mean, you really said it beautifully. I feel very, I'm sort of in this place, especially because I have been working on changing systems since I was literally a teenager. I'm in this place as I turned 41 this year, and I feel sorely disappointed with the state of the world, where I'm like, oh, maybe part of my job, because the first part of my job, the first, like 20 years of my work was like destroying systems, yelling at them, taking them down, putting a mirror up in front of electeds, being like, do you look at what you're doing? You can only do that for so long. Like your body shifts, and things happen where you're just like, oh, I have a different perspective now. So I feel like so much of the work that I feel interested in now is like truly helping people imagine differently. And inspiration is like not the right word. It's really like putting up a mirror to people and being like, what do you want to see? What world do you really want to live in? Like, and how do we do that together? Like, how do we get on that ride together? I feel very, very like curious about that way of being. And I also have a child. I have an 8-year-old, and children just give you a different kind of perspective. And so watching him, and also what he's around all these people in my life. So he's listening to me. We were driving down the road today, and we were talking about something, and we were talking about abolition, and he was like, okay, well, that was your second book. What's the next book you're going to write about? Like, let's think outside the box. And
he literally said that phrase? Yeah. Wow. Done. You're done.
Exactly. And I was like, yeah, let's think outside the box. What should mommy write about next? And it was really a beautiful conversation. And just having that opportunity to be in community with this little tiny human being, I'm like, oh yeah, like how do I want to usher us into something different? So, okay, I have a few questions here. Oh, okay. I like this one. I like all of them, but what is your greatest hope for 2025?
Wow.
I know.
Well, I mean, there's one very obvious hope. I think that we are facing a very stark choice. My hope, if without catastrophizing, I would say my hope is obviously that one candidate prevails for, and not a perfect candidate.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we need a lot. I think that a lot of the challenges that we are facing are not going to, they're in no way going to be erased or they're not going to evaporate when and if she's elected. However, we have a much better shot at addressing them thoughtfully than the opposite. My hope for 2025 is that, well, my hope is that we survive the end of 2024. And I actually, this makes me, I don't know if I can articulate this well right in this moment, but we have to find a way to talk to each other, and we have to find a way outside of, and I'm not exactly sure how to do this. It does get back to a kind of, because if we're going to imagine alternate futures, we have to have some sort of buy-in. People have to feel that they have a stake. And I don't know how you do that with the power of conspiracy and the power of a kind of cultish mindset. How do you reach people? And I do think that too will require humility. And so my hope is that we have a surfeit of humility and compassion, and that may be wish casting a complete pipe dream because the challenges are so dire. But I think if I'm being honest, we could get a lot further with some of that and recognizing our shared humanity. I think the problem is we can see this globally, geopolitically here, that we don't recognize each other's essential humanity. So I guess my hope is that we would recognize each other's essential humanity.
That's really beautiful. I read something, I wish I had the exact remembering of this, but it helped me understand this moment of mass mis and disinformation. This was like 100-something years ago, and it was like a headline talking about like mis and disinformation, not in that language, but like the impact of conspiracy and how it's like just like there is no real news, there's no real truth. And it was helpful to see that because I was like, oh, we're in like a blip. We're in a moment in history. And this moment we're in is actually not a sustainable one. Like, you can't sustain this level of wildness. Like, it just can't live forever. And I really do believe that at the end of the day, like, life-giving institutions, people, energies always prevail. And death dealing, like, can only do so much. Like, it can only exist for so long. And maybe I'm naive, but like that helps me cope.
I don't think it's naive at all. I actually think that is a deeply hopeful message. And I also think it's connected to collapse. I think things have to collapse first. I think if we I don't know if you've heard this term, but I think it's so apt. It's Yanis Varoufakis. Did I say that right? Yeah. I said it wrong another day. He wrote this book called Techno-Feudalism, and it's about obviously the concentration of wealth and power in in tech companies and in tech CEOs, and that we are, by giving away all of our data, so we're just being mined, farmed, and we are the serfs of this feudal landscape. Now, that's pretty damn depressing. On the other hand, right, feudalism didn't actually last. And so I think, while we may be on the brink of ecological collapse, clearly we are, we're also on the brink of a kind of social collapse, and that could be a regenerative event. And we have to, for it to work and for it to be a good thing, if painful, is to say exactly what you just said, which is that we will hopefully ultimately come together and reject what is so clearly malignant.
Yeah, thank you. I like this one. Art is often confused with decoration or design. Many organizations want to something with artists, want to work with artists. What should they consider when planning to do so? I have so many thoughts about this, but please
You go
ahead.
first, because that's a good one.
Yeah, it makes me really annoyed when an organization has planned a whole thing and then they call the artist in at the last minute to like, hey, you want to do the poetry? Or hey, can you just do this like quick thing that like will decorate the space versus bringing artists in at the very beginning to be the strategists, the innovators, the thought partners. Like, we really lose a lot when artists are not in the room at the very beginning, when we're not making the decisions, when we're not the decision makers. And I've seen it it's so tacky. I've seen it. And I've also seen it just like the artist they're not giving their best work because they're being dictated on how, we wanted to see this thing. And so, yeah, I really I think for orgs in particular, cities, like bring the artists in from the beginning, have them be a part of the process and the innovation process.
That's so beautiful. I completely agree. And I actually think that this would be a good practice generally across disciplines. If you have an artist at the table, regardless of what the discipline is, I guarantee you're going to have a more expansive perspective afterward. You're going to have something that you'd never even considered. I think that is the power of bringing in the type of creative thinking and to your son's point, outside the box thinking that ensures speaking of imagination, like really innovative new projects. And I agree with you. I think like, for example, I feel very lucky to, and I know you do too, to work with West Hollywood, where the I don't want to say the primacy of the artist, but the artist's voice is respected and engaged at all times. I have certainly been involved in other projects where that is not the case, and you're right, it's disrespectful. It doesn't end with great work, and ultimately, it's like, I guess in Hollywood, I was told, this was like literally 20 years ago, that like comedy writers talk about when the studio gets involved, they call it putting it through the blender. It gets put through the blender, and we can't have that.
I have two more questions. Okay. How do you, I guess this is for the both of us, how do we as public artists make complex ideas legible to the general public? You start.
Okay, well, so we sort of touched on this earlier, but I think this is the ongoing challenge and opportunity of public art. I think, or anything that is intended for a general audience. And I think it's the thing that's exciting about that, which is that, you want something to be conceptually rigorous and layered. You also want it to be accessible to literally anyone. You want it to be as accessible to an 8-year-old as it is to, a 90-year-old or anyone who happens to encounter it. And again, I guess my own personal strategy is to keep the storytelling simple but clear, and hopefully as visually compelling as possible, and not get kind of tied up in. I think there's an elitism, honestly, to or a kind of solipsistic instinct in making it really self-referential or overly theoretical in and of itself. Now, it can have all that stuff in it, but how do you include people in the conversation versus exclude them or make them feel that they can't understand it, be a part of it, any of that? I think that's the challenge and the opportunity. What about you?
Yeah, I love this. I'll just say there's one specific public art project that I did. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. A lot of people don't know me as an artist. They know me solely like as an activist, organizer. And then people learn about my art practice, they're like, whoa, we had no idea. Which is fine, and then people learn about the practice. But my practice started off as a dance practice and then ended up as a public art practice. And, when I, in some ways, like really pushed myself to be more public with my art and also have a public art practice, it was to push and challenge the conditions of Angelenos inside of Los Angeles County and within its jail system. And so I spent pretty much a decade focusing solely on an art practice that looked and confronted the jails and confronted carcerality in Los Angeles County. And one project that I did that I think just kind of helps answer this question was a bunch of us built 100 jail beds. And we dropped it in the middle of the street on a random Tuesday during a county board of supervisor meeting and held the street for 8 hours and forced the county to be in a different kind of conversation with us about incarceration and carcerality. And that was a really special project because it was the first time that the county understood that, like, oh, these people who've been nagging us for about 6 years, they're not going anywhere. Like, they just made 100 jail beds and they put them in the middle of the street. Like, guess we're gonna have to really deal with them. And there's something about public art, I think, that does that to us, where it's like, oh, I guess I have to deal with this. Like, this, it's right in front of me. Like, I can't leave. I'm like stuck. People who were obviously driving through downtown that day, like they couldn't get through. There was like angry people, but there was people who were like, yes. And, we had to have this whole dynamic with LAPD as they kept being like, you got to move or you're going to arrest you. We're like, we just need 15 more minutes. 15 minutes turned to 8 hours. They didn't want to arrest people. They also didn't want to have to like remove 100 jail beds. And so I think part of the work of the public artist specifically is, what is the thing that you feel most interested in? And then how is it impacting your community? And then how does that turn into work that you can keep coming back to and keep coming back to, that really pushes the public to be inside of that conversation? And I think in a city like Los Angeles, that is a weird place to live. I grew up here, but it's a city of dissonance on purpose. And so to have to confront something like carcerality or a body autonomy becomes like a very particular act that forces the audience to, the public to be responsive to it.
It quite literally disrupts in the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, if you want pablum, if you want some pretty design, knock yourself out.
Right.
That's not art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, my favorite one. What is your favorite taco in LA or taco stand?
Oh, that is so controversial. Like, that's the most controversial question that came up tonight. Ooh, that's a tough one.
Okay, maybe one of your favorites.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That gives me cover. I mean, I feel like it's such a cliche. Just
say it.
But I gotta say, I love guisados. I mean, I just do. I know, that's like, so, is that basic?
No, it's
Is
not
that,
basic.
Okay.
We love it.
What about you?
I have two. Leo's Tacos on Pico, right? That's Pico or Venice. Fave. And then there is a spot, hear me out, in Calabasas on Valley Circle, right before the 101. Have you been there? Yes. Oh my God. It's so good. And they like fry the cheese on the tortilla and they flip it over. I know, it's quite delicious and it makes me happy. It's like a little stand and they're there every night. And the one on...
Yeah, the one on Valley Village.
No, Valley Circle. No, there's no name. It's just literally a stand. Leo's Tacos is like, we know where Leo's Tacos is, but this one is like it's a crew off of Valley Circle, right before the 101, and they have a stand, and it's there every night, and it's delicious.
It's a deep cut. That's like the deepest. You're welcome.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you coming
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you. WehoTV.